Hi guys, welcome back. So I watched the Kashmiri Files. I couldn't bring myself to watch this film for a very long time because I didn't think that I could handle the gruesomeness of what has happened to our own people. Most part of the truth of what happened in Kashmir in the 1990 were hidden and not talked about. The genocide and exodus of Kashmiri Pandits from Kashmir is still kept in the dark. But everything we know about it so far is just gruesome and blood-wrenching. So I couldn't bring myself to watch what had happened to one of the greatest communities in the Hindu tradition. And then the film was released on TV and I was able to watch it. Fortunately or unfortunately, it was not as gruesome or horrific as I had expected it would be. I was a bit disappointed by how the movie has handled the genocide. It felt like a movie not about the genocide itself, but the politics behind it, about the narrative created by the left and the right about the genocide. In this video, I'm going to share with you why I felt so. Let's look at each of the points one by one. The movie is about a young Kashmiri Pandit named Krishna, who studies in a top Indian university and supports the left narrative or the ultra-left narrative of separatism and Free Kashmir movement. He doesn't know what happened to his own family in Kashmir, and through a lot of painful discoveries, he comes to realize his own dark past and then goes on to educate the left-leaning students in his campus about the actual history of Kashmir. He does this in one big speech. There was a lot of interesting characters and plot lines in this film. The communists, the left liberals, the Islamic terrorist who poses as freedom fighters, the victims of Kashmir Genocide, the politicians, the media persons, the authorities who couldn't do a damn thing about the genocide in a democratic country, even if they had all the power in their hands. I really thought that Kashmir Files was about the genocide, but it was more about the aftermath of the genocide, the politics behind it, and it is a perspective of the genocide rather than the objective portrayal of the genocide itself. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing or a good thing. I just didn't expect an Indian version of Orhan Pamuk's No. That's all I mean. Rather, I expected Indian version of the Netflix series Caliphate. Well, I come from Kerala, but that's not my point. Before I talk about the movie, I think it's important to share a bit about my experience as a youth. This is not about Kashmiri Pandits, but about communism, secular liberalism, and the propaganda that goes on in the top universities. Like I said before, that has a huge significance in this movie. So, I studied in TISS for 3 years without ever reaching graduation. TISS is a very popular university for social sciences. Therefore, it was a hotbed for secular liberals and left-leaning youth. I was also one of them. Correction, you had to be a leftist to be a part of the Tissian conversation, or at least that's what I gathered in the years that I was in TISS. I was a communist, an atheist, and as all communists are, I was also a secular liberal. We were always taught that the upper caste Hindus were the crux of all problems in India. The upper caste Hindus were brutal to everyone else around them, especially the upper caste Hindu men. We would write essays about patriarchy, treatment of women in India, the rationale behind reservations, and most importantly, everything about Marxism and communism. Everything meaning all the good things, obviously. By 2014, our brains were so ingrained with this education that taught us to fight the Brahmanical patriarchal system that we were also a part of. And a 200-strong college was ready for action. And then protests broke out everywhere. JNU, HCU, Jamia Millia University, Rohit Vemula case, the commemoration of Afzal Guru, the commemoration of Yaqub Memon, the emergence of Kanhaiya Kumar, and so on. It still surprises me that I thought it was a good idea that some students in JNU were commemorating the death of a terrorist like Yaqub Memon, or even worse, Afzal Guru. Why did I do that? And I see that same guy in the Kashmiri Files. Everyone in my family is right-wing, and I used to be a communist, and I used to consider my own family to be bigoted people who support fascism. And the same we get to see in the movie as well. In the movie, it's more about how Hindus hate Muslims rather than about fascism. A guy who has lost everything to Islamic terrorism still side with the terrorist by sloganeering Azadi and freedom for minorities. It's one hell of a brainwashing, I can tell you that. There is a leftist narrative for everything that happened in India in the modern era, and most of them are just lies. But the question arises, was Kashmir Files trying to create an alternative narrative? We know that the Kashmir Genocide is a reality that people are trying to hide. There are people who don't want it to be called a genocide, but a freedom struggle and a righteous struggle against high caste rich Kashmiri Pandits. And the movie and this movie challenges that narrative and upholds the decision of the government to crack down on the terrorism in Kashmir and to repeal Article 370. The movie actually claims that Kashmiri Pandits wanted to revoke Article 370. I don't know if it's my ignorance, but I have never heard that it was ever a demand of the victims of Kashmir Genocide to revoke Article 370. It would make much more sense to say that they wanted to return to their state. But why would the victims of genocide come together for a political motive? Similarly, the focus of this movie was the youth, and the goal was to make them understand the glory of India's past, and how the right wing is trying so much to uplift that glory, and the left is always trying to destroy it. Also, to understand why revoking Article 370 is a good thing, why cracking down on separatism is a good thing, and to understand why Kashmir is an integral part of India. Am I saying that all these are bad then? Of course not. The point is, I don't understand why any of these are relevant in a movie that's about the genocide of Kashmiri Pandits. Kashmir Genocide 1990. The government may have done really well in maintaining the integrity and peace of that state or region. It has done very well in resolving the decades-long insurgency and separatist movement in Jammu and Kashmir. But why would you choose a genocide to discuss all of this? Why choose the victims of a genocide to deliver that message to the nation? Especially when this is a genocide that people actually don't know about and is not a part of our history books until now. My opinion is that talking about what actually happened in Kashmir Genocide was a much more relevant theme than about the politics behind it, because people deserve to know what happened over there. The victims deserve to be heard, not as part of a political narrative, not as a side note of a political movie, but for their own sake. The movie touches upon some of the events that happened in Kashmir in 1990, but not all. So I decided to add some more details, more than just one odd mass murder, just to prove my point. iKashmiri.net is actually a great site to know more about the Kashmir Genocide. I'm just gonna read some of the stories written in that site. Genocide in Kashmir. 350,000 Kashmir Pandits, constituting 99% of the total population of Hindus living in the Muslim majority area of Kashmir Valley, were forcibly pushed out of the valley by Muslim terrorists. They have been forced to live their lives of exiles in their own country, outside their homeland, by unleashing a systemic campaign of terror, murder, loot, and arson. The strategies involved in the terrorist operation against Hindus in Kashmir include extermination of Hindus, subjecting Hindus to brutal torture to instill fear among them in order to achieve their submission, to engineer a forced mass exodus of Hindus from their land of their ancestors and birth by way of issuing threatening letters, kidnappings, and torture deaths on non-compliance of terrorist dictates, and ensure the destruction of the secular and pluralistic character of the socio-political fabric of the Kashmiri society. Attacks, molestations, kidnappings, gang rapes of women folk of Hindus in order to instill fear and humiliation in them. Destruction and burning of the residential houses of Hindus who leave their homes in lookout for safety. Looting of their properties and appropriation of their business establishments to ensure that they do not return. Attachment of their landed property. Destruction of the social base of Hindus by desecration and destruction of their places of worship. Appropriation of the property of the Hindu shrines and attachment to Muslim religious endowments. Now, if you look at some of the atrocities done in Kashmir, there is 7 exoduses of Kashmir Pandits that have happened so far. There are massacres of Hindus and Sikhs still happening in Kashmir. Perpetrated atrocities on women and children indiscriminately. Every such act has its own brutality, crudity, and sheer horror. Kidnap a woman, kill her by outraging her modesty, after outraging her modesty, or rape and kill her in her own house in presence of her family members, and then kill them all, or just kill indiscriminately. Often the excuse for such act is suspicion about loyalty to the cause on the part of the victim or the family, or to strike terror. There is just a huge list of women raped and killed in Kashmir that is given below. It goes up to 80 cases that these people have been able to report. I don't want to go into a lot of details, but you can check out this site to know what is the ground reality of rapes, kidnappings, mass murders, massacres, destruction of temples, of property, of educational institutions, and even the killing of moderate Muslims and Muslims who do not submit to the Islamists. The gruesomeness of everything is just unbearable. A very small part of this history I read to you just now have been covered in the film. Just the story of one family, the family of Krishna, who still became a Hindu-hating communist who fights for the Azadi of Kashmir. But the film shows incredible spine and audacity to say what they want. I would say they have still whitewashed the Kashmir Genocide. Yes, you heard me right. But they still don't make any excuses for what they have said. They don't make any effort to apologize for using the terms that they have done, even if it crosses the threshold of Islamophobia. The famous slogan of Relief Salivia Galif was talked about extensively. The role of Pakistan was not mentioned in the whole movie, which was very weird. But the Indian terrorist groups, even the groups that are quote-unquote religious organizations, have been called out for what they are. And of course, the role of military in dealing with a lot of what went down in Kashmir was not really shown. But the role of the current government and its political decisions are talked about at length. That this movie has come out addressing radical Islam in India is commendable in itself. I was expecting the opening of some of the very secret, confidential, classified Kashmir Files about the reality of what happened in 1990 in Kashmir, but I did not find it. Instead, I walked down my own memory lane, feeling ashamed about an ideology I once described to. Maybe that was the real motive behind this movie. I don't know. And now it's your turn. Did you watch this movie, or did you find this fine to watch this movie? And what do you think? Please tell me in the comment section. I hope you like this video, and please don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Really, please subscribe. Thank you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.